Chapter 38. Sorceress Memorial. East of Esthar, north of the Lunar Gate, the Sorceress Memorial rested in the middle of seemingly nowhere. It was a very old building, designed for a singular, specific purpose. In its history, it had only been used once. For the sealing of Sorceress Rinoa, the building had been serviced and cleaned. The nearly 20-year-old technology was bulky and built from spare parts, but it was no less effective for that. From the outside, at the base of the long stairs, it was an ominous sort of structure. The yellowing of the sky with the sunset, the dry breeze blowing in from the dry land, did nothing to ease the illusion of misery. Squall, Quistis, and Zell stood at the last step, looking up with determined faces. Their weapons were at the ready, but sheathed so it wasn't obvious. "Hold on, Rinoa. I'm coming." Squall and his friends started up together as a unit. In perfect unison. Moving with the ease and familiarity of years of being trained as partners, as comrades. They were silent. They didn't need to speak. At the top, the entrance was guarded by 2 Esthar soldiers. One tensed, having heard the warning about Commander Leonhardt. The other, however, had been one of the 2 that had taken Rinoa away at the landing site. His sympathies stirred for the heartbroken Seed. He held out one hand, preventing his partner from drawing his weapon. "You want to see your comrade off, hey?" he asked softly. The Seed stopped in front of them, not responding. Their set faces didn't appear hostile. The soldier nodded sadly and jerked his head back. "I'll make an exception. Go ahead." Squall strode forward, Quistis and Zell just a step behind him. The glass doors slid open and revealed a control room with outdated technology and scientists moving quickly about trying to bring it back to life. Beyond a glass partition, encased in a strange machine, Rinoa stood within a metal cage wrapped with many flowing tubes. She was looking down at the floor. Filled with fear and sorrow. Too much to realize what Squall was doing. One of the scientists noticed them enter and jumped. "This is a restricted area," he yelled, looking past him to the guards. "What are you doing here?" "What I should have done earlier," Squall said calmly, coming down the steps into the room. Behind him, Quistis's whip hit the ground, sparking. Zell smirked as he planted his burning fist against his smoking palm. "It may be a mistake, but I'll never know unless I do it," Squall continued quite calmly. "What are you talking about?" The scientists backed away quickly. They weren't fighters. "I know what I want, and what I have to do." Squall's gaze was freezing hot as he gave them his most chilling death glare. "There's still a chance. I'm not gonna look back. I'm taking Rinoa with me." "What?" The head scientist jerked back, fear in his eyes. "You must be joking. It's too late for her." Quistis's whip snapped forward. The scientists all hit the deck. The tip of the scorpion embedded into the control panel and the thundara she sent down the body crashed the system. Smoke billowed forth from the components as the alarms started blaring. "Go, Squall!" Zell yelled, turning to face the incoming guards. Squall ran. Through the entrance and into the sealing chamber. A thin metal catwalk surrounded by wires and tubes clanked loudly under his boots. It was strangely cold in here, even to him. Shiva didn't like this cold. It was an affront to her. She started absorbing the energy almost as soon as he walked inside though. It was her nature, their nature. Encased in some strange, transparent substance. Rinoa looked up as he approached. He didn't hear her gasp as she touched the walls of the cage.
Rinoa, hold on!
Squall yelled. He didn't know if she could hear him, but he knew she felt it.
I'll get you out in a sec.
His eyes cast around quickly, looking for something to break the seal. On Adele's tomb, it had been part of the device itself. He didn't see it now. This version was different from Adele's. Growling in frustration, Squall slammed his fist into one of the machines.
What am I supposed to do? Come on! Think!
It's like cold sleep, Shiva whispered to him. It's similar. Feel it? Feel the false cold? It's centered in that tube there. Slice it. I'll handle the rest. Drawing his gunblade, Squall glared at the offending tube in question. It lay right across his vision, connecting the cage to the machines around it. He pulled up and sliced down with a cry. The tube split with a loud hissing as white gas rushed out. Cold and strange. Shiva absorbed it all easily, keeping him from cold sleep. Keeping Rinoa from falling into cold sleep. The mist filled the room and Squall squinted into it, trying to see what was going on. That sound. It was a small gasp. Then her face. Coming towards him from the mist. A smile spread across her cheeks as she fell forward from the cage. Squall nearly dropped the punishment as he reached for her. Her arms slipped around his neck. Sheathing the gunblade, he grabbed her with both hands. Holding her waist, running his hand over her hair as he held her tight. Breathing her scent. She smelled like flowers again, even without her perfume.
Squall, don't!
Rinoa leaned back, tears in her eyes.
I'm a sorceress. I don't care,
he said simply.
I want you with me. You said you would stay with me.
She smiled through her tears.
Circumstances changed, Squall. Yeah, and I changed them back.
She struggled to breath for a second.
Squall, you.
Squall.
Rinoa.
Quistis yelled from the other room.
Come on. We need to leave. Let's go.
Squall squeezed her once more, just once more for now, to convince himself that she was still alive. Then he released her. Taking her hand, he started running her down the aisle. Rinoa fell in line readily enough. Happy to follow him wherever he chose. Quistis and Zell were fighting off SDR soldiers out front. They had already taken out more than a few, but the army that had come for Rinoa was quickly coming back. And while Squall would happily decimate an army for her, he would rather work smarter. Pulling the communicator Zell had found in the Ragnarok lockers from his pocket, he lifted it to his mouth and pressed the call button. The radio waves, functioning perfectly, zipped through the air.
Irvine. The princess is out of the tower. Bring her around.
Squall paused in front of the steps. Okay, he might have to fight a bit. There were way more soldiers blocking his path than he had predicted. All angry. All weapons drawn.
Atentian.
The call wasn't for them. It was for the soldiers. The ones guarding their path suddenly dropped back as a large Estharian man came forward. Wearing golden robes in the style that Esthar preferred, he waved his hands, telling the soldiers to step away without a word. The blonde and grey beard under his head wrap concealed his expression, but his bright blue eyes looked at the seeds. At Rinoa. Then to Squall. He stared longest at him. Then he nodded once. They didn't need more permission. Zell and Quistis sprinted forward and around him. Squall rushed after them, still holding Rinoa's hand. He paused only once to look back. The large man was watching Squall carefully, his expression unreadable. Squall felt like he had seen him somewhere before. Over the loudspeaker on the Ragnarok, Selphie let out a holler of delight as the ship rushed over the memorial. Swinging the body around, Irvine was opening the bay doors. Already as she landed at the base of the stairs, the soldiers cried out as the engines sent a burst of hot air their way. Squall turned and continued running down. Zell and Quistis jumped aboard first. Squall and Rinoa hit the deck and Irvine called out for Selphie to lift off. He was already slamming the bay doors closed as she did so. Squall turned back, but he could no longer see the bearded man who let them go. He shook his head, bringing up his communicator.
Selphie, hit the afterburners.
They almost heard her cry of excitement from upstairs. The boost kicked on immediately. The others caught themselves before falling. Squall caught Rinoa. As they adjusted to the speed, Zell started whooping excitedly.
"Oh yeah!"
Zell yelled, fist pumping the air.
"That's what I call a successful retrieval mission, baby. I wish that could have been recorded. That was awesome." "Nicely done,"
Irvine grinned at them.
"Come on, let's get back to the bridge. Selphie will want to see Rinoa too."
Squall nodded and started forward, pulling Rinoa with him. He hadn't released her hand. She was staring at the ground, but she went willingly as the others moved back to the lift. Then up into the cockpit, where Selphie was singing a weird modification of her train song.
"Nice going, guys. How was that pull around? Was it awesome?" "So awesome!"
Zell laughed.
"When did you find a speaker?"
Irvine couldn't help but ask.
"I dunno. I just pressed a button and the speaker came on. It was pretty sweet. And how many chances am I gonna have to do that again?"
The others laughed. Even Squall smiled. Except Rinoa, she was still staring down at the ground. She almost looked like she was trying to hide behind Squall. Quistis turned back to her and smiled gently at her expression.
"What's wrong, Rinoa?"
She bit her lip, looking up. Her face was red.
"I'm just a little embarrassed." "Why?"
Zell smirked, smug.
"It's just I was so set on staying in SDR. But then, when you guys came to get me, it made me so happy, and I..."
Irvine chuckled, tipping his hat to her.
"No need to be embarrassed about something like that." "Yeah, happy is good,"
Selphie hollered.
"Squall, can I hit the turbo again?" "No,"
he raised an eyebrow at her.
"Thanks, everybody,"
she said, squeezing Squall's hand just a bit tighter. Zell looked over to their leader. He was happy, but he wasn't celebrating. Zell felt like that was wrong, seeing as how this was his mission.
"Squall, you're awfully quiet. What's on your mind?"
What wasn't on his mind? He had a lot of things to think about right now. Saving Rinoa was a reckless action, which was fine. He was okay with that. But now he needed a plan and...
As an expert Squall observer,
Quistis put a hand to herself.
"I would say he's thinking, what do we do now? Where do we go next? How's everyone going to blah blah blah? You know, if you think and worry too much, everything tends to turn bad. Come on, Squall. Why don't we just picture a brighter future? Whatever.
He was grinning as he said it. Rinoa smiled, laughing a bit.
No, but seriously,
Zell looked at them.
What do we do from here? I mean, I'm 100% down with the rescue Rinoa mission, but what next? Don't we have to do something about that Pandora thing in Esthar? After all, the Galbadians are controlling it. Which means Cypher are probably involved, too. Right.
Squall already knew that. He frowned. Thinking about his training partner. About the strange shell of a man he had become.
Cypher is Ultimecia's puppet. Yeah, and that Ultimecia.
Zell scoffed.
We can't let some jacked sorceress from the future mess up our world. Let's go kick her ass. We're seeds. We're here to destroy sorceresses, right? Zell.
Squall roared, furious. Rinoa had flinched just a small bit. Even if Squall hadn't felt it in his hand, he could feel it in her heart. Zell jumped, guilty.
Ah, shit. There goes my mouth again. Sorry. I didn't mean it like. Ah. So, Squall.
Quistis looked at him expectantly. He really disliked that look. It meant people were depending on him to make decisions again.
Where are we going?
Ah, whatever. If he had to choose. Rinoa spoke up softly, hesitantly.
Can we go to the orphanage you guys were talking about in Trabia? The one you grew up in. But that place is in shambles,
Quistis said, confused. Selphie nodded.
Yeah, there's nothing to see there but some old rocks and weeds.
Rinoa knew that. That was why she wanted to go there.
I want to stay away from places where there are lots of people. I'm a sorceress. If Ultimecia possesses me again.
She trailed off, unable to finish the thought. She didn't have to.
Let's go,
Squall pointed ahead of them.
Head to Edia's house. Yes, sir.
Selphie laughed, adjusting course.
Centra, here we come. Hold on to your butts, I'm kicking on the turbo again. I said, no.
She did it anyway. Edia's house, set on the shore of a cape and surrounded by a long field of flowers, was incredibly peaceful. There were no monsters here because there was nothing to eat here. The Ragnarok came to rest near the house, the burners still smoking as the bay doors opened. Irvine, Zell, and Quistis stepped out, laughing and talking. Selphie smiled, removing her hand from the button to lower the doors. She looked over to Squall and Rinoa. They hadn't let go of each other's hands even once.
I don't get it,
Selphie grinned, catching their attention.
Get what?
Squall asked, calm. She shrugged.
I never imagined you two would end up together. I mean, you guys are totally complete opposites. I didn't think Rinoa's straightforward approach would work.
Rinoa flushed red as Selphie laughed happily.
I'm glad I was wrong. It's good to see you smiling, Squall. What about you, Selphie?
Rinoa asked her.
Why are you here? Oh, me? I just like being surrounded by lots of friends. And I'm always down for whatever.
She was still laughing as she pranced down the hangar ramp. Rinoa smiled after her as she and Squall started down after everyone. Irvine was waiting at the bottom, his arm around Selfie's shoulders. He winked at Rinoa as they approached, before sighing dreamily at the pair of them.
Ah, this is good. This is very good. What is?
Squall asked, more because he knew Irvine wanted him to than because he was curious.
See this scar here?
Irvine tilted his head, showing a long line under his chin.
I had to put up with Rinoa's kicks and punches and blaster for you. And the girl can hit for someone so small. So, seeing you two like this makes it all worth it. I'm sorry, Irvine,
Rinoa grimaced.
No, you're not. But I'm glad we went back. Don't worry about it. Okay, we'll leave you two alone now. Come on, Selfie. Let's go check out the bunks on the ship. Race you there.
She laughed, running back up the ramp.
They're going to go have sex in the ship, you know that right?
Rinoa asked Squall when they disappeared inside. He sighed.
I really don't care anymore. I just hope they keep it to one bed so we don't have to sleep where they did.
Rinoa laughed as they started down the path to the orphanage. The others were right. It was a crumbling mess after so long unattended. It didn't seem desolate though. There was almost a sort of purity to the air here, calming her spirit. Zell was standing in the path, staring at it with a grin. They approached him from behind and he turned with a smirk.
It still kind of feels like home even after so long. Wouldn't you say?
Squall looked at the building. Echoes of memories whispered, lost in his head. Lost to time, lost to the GF. It didn't really matter. The images were gone. But the feelings remained.
Yeah. Still feels like home.
Zell nodded, grinning. For a long moment. He realized a bit too late and jumped.
Oh. Sorry. About what?
Squall raised an eyebrow.
I'm sure you want to be alone with her. You know Squall, I never thought you were the Romana, you know. That whole thing. What about you, Zell?
Rinoa asked sweetly, jumping in before he could tease Squall further.
That girl in the library.
Zell flushed bright red. Stuttering.
What? I don't know what you're talking about.
Rinoa laughed as Squall smirked at him.
Oh, please. All the girls in the garden know about it. Even I noticed it right away and I barely know her. She's pretty cute, too. Got that whole girl next door vibe going on. Hey. This isn't about me. And why does everyone call her the library girl?
Grumbling, blushing bright red, Zell stomped past them. They heard him muttering about going hunting for something to eat and looked at each other, sharing a smile. She was chuckling as Squall led her further down the path. From inside the ship, led there by Zell and the others, Angelo jogged past. He barked happily at the two of them before turning left off the path and running out of sight. Rinoa and Squall followed him slowly and saw Quistis standing beside one of the columns, laughing at the sight of Angelo frolicking in the flowers. She turned at their approach and nodded out towards the long field.
This place is beautiful. Yeah, the flower field.
Squall looked around. The familiar, comforting scent of the white and yellow flowers. A scent that perfectly matched Rinoa's perfume. Now the scent that just seemed to come naturally from her.
I forgot all about this place. Matron loved these flowers.
Quistis smiled, bending down to pick one of the blooms. She stood back up again, cradling it in her hand.
Such a strong scent. Feminine, with a hint of honey. It kind of takes over your senses, doesn't it? Forces its way in.
Quistis turned to Squall.
Rinoa forced her way into your world, no matter how many walls you built around yourself to keep her out. I thought it would be enough to wait for you to come out on your own, but it never would be. I could never compete with her. And, after a while, I only worried about whether or not you would make a place for her. And you did. Pretty quickly too. She's got that kind of personality that's hard to ignore. Just forces its way in.
Rinoa was blushing at the description. Smiling.
I never could resist a challenge.
Quistis laughed.
Yeah. I've heard that somewhere before. Thanks, Quistis,
Squall said gently, surprising her.
For what? For waiting outside. For keeping your eye on me even when I turned my back on you. I know I hurt you with the selfish way I acted. Thanks for sticking around despite that.
Quistis blushed. She looked away quickly, hiding her wet eyes.
Hey, what are big sisters for? You've really changed, Squall. It's like Rinoa's the only one on your mind.
Laughing, she looked back at them.
Good thing this wasn't before the exam. I don't know if you would have passed, distracted like this. I don't think I would have tried for seed if I had her before the exam. Fair enough,
Quistis smiled.
I'll leave you two alone now. Maybe I'll go see if Zell wants to go hunting. I think he already left,
Rinoa said, looking back.
Then I'll go catch up. Or I'll go keep Selfie and Irvine from defiling all the flat surfaces of the ship. What makes you think they'll stop at the flat surfaces?
Squall asked.
Sadly, you make a good point.
Quistis smiled as she turned and walked away. Rinoa and Squall watched her go before looking back at the flower flight. The sun was coming through the clouds brightly, covering the field in dazzling rays of light. A gentle breeze floated by, stirring the petals and sending their sweet pollen into the air. Rinoa smiled at him before finally releasing his hand. She stepped to the edge of the field and kneeled down before the flowers. Squall watched her reach out and gently stroke one of the petals. There was a sad sort of smile on her face. For the first time since being left out to die, floating in the emptiness of space, she finally had time to think and consider things. And she didn't feel good about it.
What'll become of me?
She asked softly.
Don't worry about it,
Squall said, coming around to the column next to her. He leaned back against the stone, just watching her.
There've been many good sorceresses. Edia was one. You can be like her. But Edia still.
Rinoa frowned, thinking about all the atrocities Ultimecia had committed in her name. Edia had been just as helpless as herself.
And I can't guarantee anything either. If Ultimecia possesses me again. You saw me. You saw how I was.
Rinoa stood up again, letting out a long sigh.
I tried fighting. I really did. Without Diablos, I don't think I could have lasted as long as I did.
Unlike Edia, Rinoa hadn't surrendered her body to protect her mind. She had fought against Ultimecia's control from the beginning. The struggle left her tired, but it also meant that Ultimecia had needed to fight back against her in turn. Despite that fight, Ultimecia still won.
She made me break Adel's seal. She made me hurt so many people. Even you.
Rinoa looked over at him, her eyes sad.
Why did you keep grabbing me? You know she was hurting you. Was I supposed to let you go?
He asked calmly.
You wouldn't have been hurt if you had. If I was adverse to pain, I wouldn't be here now. The only real torture I've ever faced was seeing you, nearly dead, in the infirmary. At least you were moving again.
Rinoa lowered her eyes.
But what happens next time? What will I end up doing? Will I end up fighting everyone? It's a scary thought, isn't it?
Rinoa. Squall reached out and took her hand. He pulled her in close, wrapping his arms around her. She went willingly, leaning against his chest, accepting his warmth. He didn't want to hear this. He didn't want to think about it. He could never hurt Rinoa. No matter what happened to her. No matter what she did. Even if she did end up as the world's enemy.
If I fall under Ultimecia's control again, Seed will come kill me, right? And the leader of Seed is you, Squall.
Her hand pressed flat over his heart.
Squall's sword will pierce my heart. I guess it's okay. If it's you, Squall. Nobody else. If that ever happens. That's enough.
His arms tightened, startling a squeak from her.
I'll never do anything like that. The sorceress I'm after is not you, Rinoa. My enemy is the sorceress from the future. Ultimecia. Ultimecia lives in the future and possesses me. She uses my body as her extension in this world. How will you save me from that? I'll come up with something. There's got to be a way.
She didn't respond.
Don't worry.
Squall reached up and gently brushed her hair behind her ears.
But no matter what happens, do not ask me to kill you. I won't. I just don't want someone else to do it. If I have to be killed, I'd rather it be you. No one is going to kill you, because I won't let them.
Squall took her face in his hands, looking at her firmly.
No one is going to hurt you. No matter what you do to them. I don't care if you choose to be an evil sorceress. If you want to take over this world, I'll help you. If you want to defend it, I'll help you. No matter what path you choose. If you're a sorceress, I'll be your knight.
Rinoa gasped slightly, the breath stuttering. Then his lips were against hers. Pressing gently at first, then growing stronger as he became more comfortable with the unfamiliar sensation. Rinoa's air left her lungs in a rush as her eyes closed. She leaned in, pressing herself into him as she gave herself over to the kiss. Her arms came around him. One hand to the back of her neck, Squall wrapped his other around her waist and jerked her in closer. The first, intoxicating taste of her was much greater than he had anticipated. It stole over his body, shutting out everything else. The warmth of her skin, the taste of her lips, the scent of flowers that wrapped around her and ensnared his senses. He twisted his head, opening his mouth on hers as he sought even greater sensation. His pleasure, her pleasure, mixed together into one potent combination. His tongue traced along her lips. They fell open willingly, taking him in. Accepting him, pulling him down deeper. She moaned and the reverberation of it tickled his chest. He groaned as he tilted his head, getting a better taste. More. He wanted more. How had he ever survived without this? Why had he waited so long to do this? All those chances he had missed, had foregone to enjoy this slammed into him all at once. Immediately on its tail came the fear that he had almost missed it. Almost let her go. He'd never let her go again. He'd never risk losing her. He couldn't survive without her. Without the taste of her. Without the scent of her. That melodic voice ringing in his ear when she moaned as he caressed his hand down the arch of her spine, causing her to tilt her body into his. She broke the kiss before he did. Her head dropping back as she gasped for breath. Squall wasn't done yet. He followed her, kissing his way down her jaw, down her throat. Seeking even more of her taste, unwilling to separate from her warmth.
"Hein, Squall,"
she panted, her hand threading through his hair. Devastating. She had known when she first got to know him that his passion would be devastating when he finally released it. Feeling it wash over her as he continued sampling her body, she thought maybe she had been a little too correct. She couldn't see straight. The pulse in her throat was racing under his lips. Her hand clenched tightly in his hair as he hit a particularly sweet spot. Her body rocked as she moaned again. Curious at her response, he went right back and explored that area until he had Rinoa trembling, soft cries escaping her throat as her free hand reached into his jacket, under his shirt, and clutched at the toned body she admired so much. Pulling back, Squall kissed her chin. Then her lips again. Once. Twice. Then a gentle sort of caress that wasn't a full kiss but was all the more intimate because of it. Then he leaned away from her slightly, his breathing fast, his eyes so on they burned her.
"Trust me, Rinoa,"
he whispered, his voice rough.
"I trust you."
She breathed back, lowering her hand to run her hand down his face.
"But, maybe, until you find a way. Maybe I should stay in SR at the memorial. I can just wait there until you succeed. Wouldn't that be better?" "No, that'd be pointless,"
he said shortly.
"I'll just end up going after you again. I won't leave you behind. Rinoa, just stay close to me."
She gasped, her eyes lighting up.
"Those words."
Squall tilted his head curiously.
"What?" "That's what started everything,"
she laughed, hugging him tightly.
"What are you talking about?"
Rinoa frowned, leaning back again.
"You don't remember?" "Something I said." "Oh, just forget it," she pouted, turning away. Squall stared for a long minute, struggling to recall his own words. He wasn't able to remember ever saying that to her before though. "Sorry. It's not me. It's the GF. That's why I forgot." "That's just an excuse."
She put her nose into the air primly.
"When did I say it before?" "Back in Deling. When you rescued me. That's when I started falling for you. You can't not remember it."
Squall thought back again, with context now. He thought maybe he could picture that moment. But there had been a lot of stuff going on that day.
"The memories are faded, some of them are gone,"
he said apologetically.
"But the feeling is still there. Those haven't faded at all. The GF don't touch our feelings."
Rinoa smiled.
"Okay. I guess that's good enough." "Feeling better?" "Yeah," she nodded.
Then, to his disappointment, she detangled herself from him. He let her go reluctantly. She just smiled and started walking into the flower field. Squall didn't hesitate. He stepped after her. She started gently humming the strains to an old song that he almost remembered as she walked.
"Can I tell you a story?"
she asked, folding her hands behind her back. Squall tilted his head curiously.
"A little while ago, back at garden, I had a dream. It was a scary dream. You and I, we make a promise. We promise to see shooting stars together. So I get dressed up, and put on your ring."
She reached up and touched the silver lion with her finger.
"But the thing is, I can't remember where I'm supposed to meet you. The harder I try, the further it gets away from me. I start to panic. I really want to see you, Squall, but I don't know where to go. I start running. Over the mountains, across the desert, through the plains. Though Timber, Balam, and Galbadia. My feet keep getting heavier, and you keep slipping away from me. So even the memory of your face, your voice, is fading away. Until I only have this feeling that I need to see you. That I have to find you again. It drives me crazy. I just want to see you so badly. So I scream. Squall, where are you? Then I woke up. I was crying."
She stopped and turned around. She looked on the verge of tears now. They had traversed about half of the flower field by this point and were surrounded by an ocean of the fragrant blooms.
"I'm sorry,"
she tried to smile.
"You don't have to say anything. I just felt like I had to tell you. It was so real to me. Like I really might have forgotten you. And it was the worst pain I'd ever felt in my life." "It was just a dream,"
he said calmly.
"It doesn't mean anything. Don't worry about it." "Yeah. You're right."
She looked away from him slightly. Squall stared for a moment, frowning. He didn't like that look on her face.
"How about this?"
She turned to him again. He held out his arms, gesturing around him.
"I'll be here."
Her head tilted curiously as her weight shifted.
"Why?" "The reason why you couldn't find me was because we haven't promised yet." "Promised?"
She blinked those large, brown eyes at him.
"I'll be waiting for you here. So if you come here, you'll find me. I promise."
A large smile split across her face.
"Then I'll be here, too. It's a promise." "Thanks, Squall. Next time, we'll meet for sure."
Squall smiled back at her gently.
"You were getting mad at a couple words I forgot when you forgot me entirely." "That was a dream,"
she tossed back her hair.
"And I said it was the worst thing ever. Doesn't count."
Squall made a noncommittal sound as he started walking again. He came around her, reaching out to stroke her shoulder gently. Now that he had touched her once, he found himself craving more. So much more. Rinoa trembled with expectation as his fingers danced along the skin of her neck. He came around her again, grabbing her cheek with his other hand. He leaned her up, pulling her into another kiss. She moaned gently as she grabbed onto his jacket, pushing herself up into him. Squall chuckled gently at her eagerness.
"You like this?"
She moaned, reaching into his jacket to touch his chest through his shirt.
"You seeds really do have many various skills."
Squall chuckled, leaning back to touch her cheek. Her breathing deepened as he trailed that finger down her throat, down her chest, then down her breast. He lingered there, just a little long, before continuing on to take her by the waist and pull her closer.
I rather like it myself,
he assured her, shifting their bodies together. Rinoa bit her lip, trying to fight the sensations he built in her. Hard to do with that unbelievable body pressed into hers. She had to focus again.
Squall, what are we going to do now? Well, personally, I was just thinking about how soft the grass is. No,
she nudged him, laughing.
Not that. No, we can't do that. Or no, we can't do that in the grass. I meant, what are we going to do in general?
She deliberately ignored the distinction.
Do you want to keep staying here?
She hesitated. Not because she had a great desire to stay, but because she wasn't sure that there was any other choice. It seemed such a temporary solution. Would the world leave them alone all the way out here? She doubted it. What kind of world was she condemning him to on the coast of a continent that no one even lived on any longer?
Hey, I happen to like this place,
he cut off that line of thinking easily.
I grew up here, you know. With a few repairs, maybe expanded a little, this place could be a great home. Sid and Edia were happy enough out here.
She smiled gently.
You would lock yourself away from the world for me? Sure. Why not? We'd be alone out here. We'd have to forage for everything. Farm our own food. I've done worse. We'd never have friends. Guests. Family. See, now that's where you're wrong. You can't expect Quistis and the others to stay,
Rinoa frowned.
I love them, too, but it would be too cruel to ask them to give up their whole lives. I just meant that you and I are perfectly capable of having a family on our own,
he corrected, eyebrow raising as she blushed.
I believe you're the one who said I'd make a good father.
She turned away, still burning red.
Yeah, okay. That may be true. But the rest of it still applies. Can you really go from seed commander to family farmer?
He shrugged, unconcerned.
If that's what it takes. I'm perfectly content with this. I never wanted to be commander anyway. I don't need anything more than you, Rinoa. Oh, Squall.
She breathed, leaning her forehead against his.
Besides, I like this ending better. Ending?
She tilted her head curiously.
On your book. The ending. The sorceress was left alone in the Grandiddy forest. She accepted a simpler life despite the aristocracy she came from, didn't she? Without her knight though. I still think it's a more romantic ending if they stay together. Even as hermits.
Rinoa laughed.
I can't believe you actually read it. It's a little more apropos now, considering everything. Either way, I'm not going to let you die. That's my line.
Rinoa took his face in hand.
If you're going to go out fighting an army, I'm going to be fighting right beside you. Get me? I wouldn't have it any other way.
He kissed her again. Slowly this time. Savoring each movement of her lips, the stroke of her tongue, the taste of her breath.
Squall. Ilo. Yo.
They jumped apart, turning quickly. Zell was sprinting their way, trying to cover his eyes and not trip at the same time.
Squall. What is it?
He asked, clutching Rinoa tight in worry. Zell reached them and, panting, pointed over his shoulder.
Man, I'm sorry. I don't mean to interrupt, but it's an emergency. Major problem. What is it?
Squall frowned, trying to scan the horizon for the problem.
It's the Estharian military man, they tracked us. We gotta bail. Bail now. What?
Rinoa gasped.
They got here that quickly. I think we sort of jumped to the top of their most wanted list.
Zell made a face.
Come on. Selfie's firing up the Ragnarok. We gotta get Rinoa out of here before they catch her again. Okay, come on.
Squall took Rinoa by the hand and they sprinted back through the flowers. Up towards where Angelo was basking in the sun beside the columns.
Come on, boy.
Rinoa patted her thigh, calling him. They turned onto the path and started running back towards the ship. They were stopped by a short call.
Squall.
The three of them jumped, turning. Edia was standing in the doorway of her house. Squall had completely forgotten that Zell told them she was returning home. Slowly, she came down from the entrance, walking towards them.
There is something I must tell you,
she said, frowning.
Matron.
Squall looked back towards the ship. Was the military close?
Can you make it fast?
She nodded.
I'll try. First, I'm sorry. I didn't know what Dr. Odin had planned for Rinoa. For myself. If I had retained my powers, it would have been me being sealed. And Rinoa, I'm sorry. Sorry for passing my powers on to you. Oh,
Rinoa looked away quickly. It was the first time she had met the kindly Edia. She wasn't prepared for just how shocking the change was.
It's okay. Can't really help it, right? I'm sure everyone is just happy you're back to yourself.
Edia nodded gratefully, accepting her words. She looked back at Squall.
There is something more important though. Squall, Sid said he mentioned to you the premonition I had here. About Seed. About their future. It was. Yes, I think it was about 13 years ago now. He told me,
Squall nodded.
It's why you created Seed. Because you knew this was going to happen and you wanted a way to stop it. That's not exactly true. Squall, no sorceress has the power to see into the future. What are you talking about? Right here. In this very spot. I met a sorceress on the verge of death. She had traveled from very far away, looking for someone to pass her powers on to. A sorceress cannot truly die until her powers are passed on. It is not true life they have though. It is a haunting, hollow sort of non-existence. She appeared here and, to protect my children, to protect you all, I accepted her powers of my own free will. I could not let her get close to one of the girls instead. This was the beginning of my story. My premonition as Sid has been calling it. And I know now, with my powers gone, that my bitter story has finally ended. What does that have to do with Seed?
Squall frowned.
She wasn't the only one I met. I also met the one who defeated her. He was the one who told me. I've based every life decision on that moment since. Even when things got hard. Got painful. When I was torn from my husband to protect our children. When I was torn from my children to protect everyone. I kept pressing on because of that moment. Because of what I knew. And now that it is over, I feel free. I've seen the end, Squall, and no matter how painful it may be, I know now that there is always an end. Therefore, Squall, you must fight to the end. Even though it may bring tragedy to others. Maybe even to yourself. You must fight, Squall. Yo, Squall!
Zell yelled from the back of the roaring Ragnarok.
We gotta go. They're only a few seconds out. Go,
Edia smiled at him.
They have no business with me. I'll be fine. Keep Rinoa safe.
Squall nodded.
Thank you, matron. For everything.
She smiled, crying, as she waved her boy away. She watched as he boarded the Ragnarok with her other babies. Even before the hatch was closed, Selphie was lifting them up and away. Edia turned as their ship took off towards the horizon. The approaching Esthar vehicles were left sitting in the dust they left behind. Edia could only hope and pray that her premonition was correct. Let the future play out as it should and let them all remain safe. End of chapter.